Hello, it's Duncan. Today in Team Gilded Rose, I think we're finally ready to deliver this story, the one that says, when I view stock in the browser, it should update quantities. We've got all the bits ready, we just need to integrate them, and we should be done. So, got quite a bit to do today, let's crack on. You may remember that we have a test here that's disabled, that shows what we thought we needed to do in order to pass this requirement, basically. So let's re-enable that and run our tests. And it fails because we know we haven't wired things up. Okay, that's good. Now then, stock here is the class that we wrote to hold all our functionality around updating the stock list. But at the moment it's sitting in our test tree. So let's move that out into our main tree so that we can use it. And now let's look in main, and we see that at the moment we build some routes, and we have a function passed in here that represents how we get a stock list. And at the moment the answer is we ask a stock file to load items. This is actually an extension method. But what we want to do now is say, let's build a stock. Now, stock is built on the stock file, which we have, and a zone, because it needs to know about time zones and how to update. So let's put those in. The stock file we already have here. The zone is zone of Europe, London. And our strategy for how to update the stock is still buried in stock tests. And it's here, this update items. So let's just copy that and we'll put it in main to give us something to work with. So we can pass a reference to that into here. Okay. Now, when the routes needs to resolve the stock list, instead of asking the stock file to load the items, it'll ask stock. And the single method on stock is stock list. So it'll ask stock for the stock list, and that will update because of the work we did last time. In order to update though, it needs to know the time, and so we will give that instant now. So now things are wired in. Let's see if it passes our tests. And it doesn't pass our tests, and it doesn't pass our test because our test assumed here that they could control when it appeared that the tests were being run, but inside main here we're just using instant now. Well, that's no good to us, so let us, as we did with the calendar, introduce a strategy for that. And there is introduce functional parameter, which will let us pull out something we'll call clock, and that should return an instant. And here we see we've gained our parameter, which is a function that takes nothing and returns an instant. IntelliJ's got this wrong actually, because we said instant and it's put in the question mark. Okay. Now, in order to use that, we're going to have to wire it into our update stock tests. And in particular, this is a local date. What we found here is what we actually need is an instant, not just a date. We need to know the time. So let's go back to our stock tests and look at the fixture and say that if our fixture had a way of fetching the current time, then we would be able to pass that into our routes here instead of this instant now that IntelliJ has added for us. It's a bit confusing because this local date we've called now. I think a better name for that in retrospect would be today. So that's today. It's defaulted to October 29th. Well, okay. we're going to add ourselves another property, which is our instant. Now we could give that a default, but it would be better to go through all the corners of this fixture parameter and give them a value in context. Okay, so here let's add in the names of these so we can see what's going on. We'll do that, and we'll say give names to the parameters. But this one here is on the outside. Let's move it in. And you see that's our clock. And so our clock should be returning the now that we give to our fixture. Okay, now that shouldn't compile because we've added a parameter here. So let's go and fix up some things. Update stock test, well, that's where we came in. We thought that we were going to be able to pass in a date, but actually we now know we need an instant. So let's take something like this. In fact, better still, let's say that we're going to, this is going to be instant parse, and we'll parse the end of the day, 23, 59, 59. And that is not today, but it's now. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make this instant parse. So we change the type of this from a local date to an instant. And this wants to be the first instant of the next day. That's going to be our now. And let's try running that. Oh, close. But we have a fixture here that doesn't know when now is. What should we pass in here? I think the answer is probably any instant, really. An instant I think we have lying around. No, let's have a look in our test data. Some instant we call it. Okay, let's go back. And one more like that. In our stock tests, probably we should say we'll pass in now is the same as the stock lists last modified. And really helpfully, that passes all of our tests. We're certainly not done yet, but let's commit that because it would be a good work in progress sort of place. I'm going to commit that as WIP for work in progress. There are some issues, but we'll no doubt fix those up as we go along. Okay, let's now have a look at our fixture again. Oh, bit over the top. We now have the issue that we have a time and a date, and depending on what we pass into our fixture, they can be different. So let's derive one from the other, and that will probably keep us honest. So instead of having this today passed in, let's have it as a property, and we know how to build one of those from an instant. And the answer is that it is local date dot of instant given some instant and given some zone offset, zone ID. And we're going back to our Europe, London. We'll hard code it for now. Let's see whether that passes our tests. Okay, list stock test has failed. Let's have a look. Let's see what the difference is between the thing we had before and the thing we have now. Well, you can see here that we used to have the 29th of October and we now had the 9th of February. And the number of days from our sell by date has changed. So it looks like we need to go to our list stock tests here. And instead of saying some instant, we need to have a time in October, on October 29th, which is when these tests thought they were running before. So let's say instead of some instant, we'll have instant parse, and we'll give it October the 29th, which is the value we had before. So that is the 2020 10 29, and we'll pick the middle of the day, because why not? I think if we put that in both these places, we've now returned our fixture to how this test expected it to be. I've just messed up the formatting there. It needs to know that it is in UTC. Now let's have a look. Oh, and finally, I've messed up the year. So this should be 2021. Okay, that is a little bit better, and it feels like another good place to commit. We'll just amend commit this last one. Right. Now, having pushed this calculation of what the date is for a particular time into the fixture, we could reasonably do the same in this roots. So instead of the roots needing a calendar and a clock, we could push this calculation in. So let's have a go at that. We'll take this, we'll look in roots for, and we'll say, well, you do have a calendar. Let's create that as a local variable, and we'll ask the clock for the time in here. And this is no longer a function, it is actually, and we need to pass a lambda in here to resolve that. Right, we no longer have this, we've moved that calculation inside. And that passes all our tests and makes today redundant, which is nice. Okay, now we can pull that stunt again. So at the moment this is inside our roots for, but we can move this calculation into our roots function here. Let's go back here and we'll say this is not calendar really, it is today. So let's cut that out of there, go inside roots and say this thing here, which we're calling now, but again a better name is today, is that expression we have moved all the way from our fixture. The zone we can use, but this clock we don't have yet. So we need a clock. In fact, we need a clock in place of this calendar. So let's just change that. And a clock is a thing that gives us an instant, not a local date. And I don't suppose we need to default it. Let's try running that. I don't know what an instant is. We can import that. And now here, instead of passing calendar, we need to pass the clock. So we've pushed that calculation of what day an instant represents in a particular zone. We've pushed it from the fixture through roots for and into our roots function here. That's quite nice. We can do a bit better probably. Let's first of all pull this zone as a parameter. Zone ID is good. And let's just check that now in our main we are using Europe London. We've got that twice, so let's just make ourselves a field in here, and this is London zone ID. Okay, let's go and have a look back in roots. There's a problem here that we are using the clock here, but the clock is also being used in main. And I don't like that because those two can be slightly different, slightly out of sync. In principle, one could happen one side of midnight, one could happen the other. So we'd like to resolve the clock in only one place. We'd like to ask the time in only one place. Now, I think we can do that by changing in our roots so that our stock, instead of just returning a stock list, would take an instant and return the stock list. And let's give this a better name, maybe listing. This is the thing that allows us to make a list. In that case, we could use our clock in here. And if we do that, then we can resolve that as a single point. All of those two, and that is now. So we'll go and get now in one place. We'll work out what today is, and then we'll ask the listing function what the stock list should be. And just looking at this, it feels like this is a bad ordering. We should probably move this listing down so that you see we've got a clock, then the zone, and then this thing that's derived from those. Little refactor. Come back to that routing HTTP handler problem in a minute. Okay, in here now, instead of this lambda calling the clock itself, we can specify our listing as go to the stock object and call its method, which is stock list. So that can go away. This stock list method takes an instant, so it's compatible with this listing function here. Run those tests. Oh, that's quite nice. Now we just one little tweak of roots. I think we could probably make a function out of this. And this would be, it would return an HTTP handler, and this is our list handler. It would take a clock, a zone ID, and how to list. Now, things are a little bit confused here because this is a lambda, but we can solve that problem by saying this is an HTTP handler. Now, these roots are a lot more simple, but in fact they're only called from this one place in roots for. So I think we might as well inline them in here. So let's inline that. The issue here is that this is still private. Make it more public. And we can tighten that all up a bit, and then this thing has been expanded into lambda for some reason, but we can turn it back into a reference. Now then, our roots is not really our roots, this is our listing. So I'm going to rename this file to be listing. And after all that, we'll run the tests. And it'll pass, which is quite pleasing. A little bit of an import there. And one more here. And one more there. Let's commit that. Again, amend, because there's no real new functionality there, just refactor. We're getting close, so let's have a look at these warnings and see what they are. Maybe go fix them up. Unused import. Right, I think we're very close. Now, one thing that may occur to you is that this update items is we just copied it in from the tests and we don't really have a test for it. On the other hand, we don't really want to couple much of our testing to the details of this because we know that this is going to change. So what I'm inclined to do is to make just have an approval test of those for now, just to have some test coverage. And that is in our update stock tests, I think, here. So at the moment, all we're showing is that when last modified was yesterday, that we get an OK, and then when we load the stock list, it isn't the same as the one before. What we'd like to do is to make this more explicit. So let's go to our list stock tests, which are approval tests, and we'll copy some of this boilerplate into our update stock tests. That extend with will give us an approver in these methods, in these test methods. That shouldn't change anything. Now though, instead of just checking that we get an OK and that the stock list is the same when we load it, we can actually approve the results. So we'll do that here, first of all. And again, some crazy imports been added. Okay, let's run that. And there isn't an approved file, so our test should fail, and we'll have a look and see what has been created for us. What's been created is update stock tests. Here with the name of the method, let's have a look in there. Is this what we expect to see returned? Well, it's hard to tell actually because we don't know what's in standard stock list. So let's inline standard stock list in here. And having inlined that, then we are creating one and then we're copying it with a different last modified. So that's just the same as creating one with that. Okay, so now we can see that what we are building is bananas and kumquat, and they're starting at apparently 104 days out of date and 102 days out of date. That seems plausible to me, and the qualities are the same though. They're 42 and 101, 42 and 101. That's good. And notice we've also got standard stock list here, which means I think that we messed up the first time, but I think we can replace that with just stock list at this point. If we approve this, let's check that doesn't change the behavior. And it doesn't, which is good. Here then, we can do the same thing. We'll put stock list in there rather than standard stock list, and we will approve the response. Doesn't go away for now. That will fail because we don't have an approved version. And now we can compare these two files to see whether updating has changed the way we expect. And so this is when last modified is today. This is when last modified was yesterday. So our day should go on 1 to the 10th. Our number of days out of date should go up 1, more negative, and our quality should go down 1. So this is the point at which we're testing that algorithm in our main function. And it's doing what we expect. It's going down 1 for every item. So not a great test. We'll obviously want better tests as we make that algorithm more complicated, but that will do for now. So let's approve this. That's good. I think we're very nearly done here. We have already found that it's a little bit confusing to have this standard stock list in our tests. So I'm wondering whether we can go and just remove it and actually explicitly say what's in our stock lists. The other place that we do that is in list stock test. So here you can see we've got standard stock list. So what I'm inclined to do is bring out a field here. I call it stock list. And then we can inline this version. So now at least we can see what it is we're dealing with. That shouldn't change anything here. And it doesn't, which is good. And I wonder whether this would just be better laid out a little bit nicer, like that. And we could do the same in update stock tests. This with then is something like a when. When the fixture is this, then this happens. It's quite a nice little way of separating out the before and what happens in our tests. So let's go and have a look in our test data then. Standard stock list is now not being used, which is good. So we can delete that. Some instant is being used somewhere. Let's go and find that. It's being used in list stock tests. No harm in inlining that. There's only one of them. Inline that. And then let's check that some instant is now unused, and it is, so we can delete it. Okay, run all those tests. I think actually that list stock tests and update stock tests are very similar. They're both approval tests and they're both really testing listing. One before and after and one on the same day. So I think we're going to merge those, but maybe fast forward that. Okay then, I think we are pretty much done. Let's commit that with a comment of install stock to update quantities. And now just a final little review of what we've done. So what we have now, a little change there. We can make that an HTTP handler rather than a routing HTTP handler. That seems to break the server, but we might as well work in the most plain types that we can. And then commit that. 2 warnings, more unused imports. So what we now have then is a nice routes method that uses our stock class to work out how to update items and when to update items. A nice list handler that uses a single clock rather than a clock and a calendar, and therefore makes use of London Zone ID. I'm quite happy with this actually at the moment. Often I come back and be less happy when I look at this in the morning, but I think we're done for the day. We could probably push this to production. Maybe we would want to keep an eye on it after midnight the next day, just to check that things updated as we expected them to. But we have a reasonable test coverage here for what is a low risk change, given that we're here able to look at the server. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, I think you probably enjoy the book that I wrote with Nat Price called Java to Kotlin and Refactoring Guidebook. There are a few more episodes, I think, of this particular example to come as we add in all of our magical items. So if you'd like to know when they are published, there's a subscribe button somewhere here. Thank you very much for watching.